A Just Us Lesbians production. If you've been listening to the Taco Stand podcast and you've been a fan of the show, I want to say thank you. We're doing this for the love of our lesbian community. And whether you identify as a lesbian, queer, or straight, thank you for supporting the podcast and thank you for taking an interest in the lesbian stories showcased here. All right, now, if it is your first time here, welcome. Glad you found us, and we hope that you'll stick around and learn a thing or two from these conversations. The Taco Stand podcast is all about vulnerability and authenticity. And with that said, I'm going to be vulnerable here and tell you honestly that I struggled quite a bit in releasing this third episode. One, I'm afraid I'm going to offend somebody, and two, I wasn't quite sure how I'm going to open the show. You see, our next guest is a Christian pastor and a lesbian at the same time. Yes, you heard that right. I know it's controversial because you won't normally hear those same identifiers coming from the same person. Regardless of your spiritual belief, I implore you to stay open and listen to her story as she reconciled these two conflicting identities. Johnene Cunningham spent 22 years in public service. She was a dispatcher in an EMT and has been in different public services from the police department, the fire department, and EMS. 7 years ago, she became a pastor and is now serving God's church in ministry. Pastor Johnene, thank you so much for joining us at the Taco Stand. This is one of the most important topics and something that's really, really close to my heart to discuss. So we're delighted to have you on the show, and thanks for, joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So we met last year, if I'm remembering correctly, at the Pride meeting. Have you heard about Just Us Lesbians before then, or that was your first meeting?
That was my first introduction when I happened to sit down next to you and Jackie.
That's amazing.
At the registration.
Yeah, that's a blessed time. I was very happy that we connected, exchanged information, and now here we are. You're still very much part of the group, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. And you joined us for bowling a few times last year.
Yes.
Have you ever wanted to get connected with a lesbian community group?
When I first moved back to this area, back to San Antonio from being down in Victoria, I thought, you're up here by yourself. You really need some community. You need some support because there's nobody.
Yeah.
Most of my friends were not around this area anymore. So it's like, okay, we got to figure out and have community.
Mm-hmm.
And things just didn't work out. At that time, I didn't find Just Us Lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it just wasn't the proper time for me to find them or for you guys to find me.
Right.
So it worked out when it was supposed to. And in a time where it's like, okay, life is hectic, like life is very busy, and I had no downtime.
Right.
So being a part of this community helped me to recenter and focus and get some self-care in.
Yeah.
And also to be a part of an amazing group of folks.
That's amazing. Thank you. We love what we do with Just As Lesbians. We like that we're providing community. I think that's a wonderful feedback that we get from people. Because someone like me who's a transplant of San Antonio, it's definitely helped me get some footing and get started with my life here. So how long have you lived here in San Antonio?
Well, I'm actually not in San Antonio anymore. I only lived here for a year, and then I got back out into the rural setting.
Oh, okay. So where do you live now?
I'm living in Poteet now. I bought a house the end of last year, and
wonderful.
Moved my mom in because she needs someone to remind her of her age so that she doesn't do things that are not age appropriate and end up in bed for 2 weeks because her body can't handle those things anymore.
Right. And then you drive in to San Antonio for work.
Yeah.
And can you share to our listeners the type of work you do?
I'm a Lutheran pastor.
Uh-huh.
I've been a ordained pastor for just over a year, but I've been doing ministry for 6 years prior. So I've been a pastor, or at least doing ministry, for about 7 years now.
And have you always wanted to do something like that?
I felt called to ministry when I was 16 at youth camp.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was struggling with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a church that almost weekly was telling me how gays were an abomination and that we were all going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wrestling with the fact that I knew God had called me to ministry, yet this pastor is telling me that I'm going to hell. So there was a lot of time spent at the altar going, God, ask someone else. I'm an abomination. You can't really,
can't be me.
It's not me.
Right.
And eventually I walked away from the church because I was so conflicted between who I knew I was, even as a Christian, but that internal conflict of what I was being told.
Right.
By someone who I should have been able to trust.
And you've always had a religious background, is that right? So your parents are they part of the church, or they just love going to church?
When I was little, every Sunday we were there.
Yeah.
Vacation Bible school, Sunday school, church. We were there every Sunday.
Yeah.
And when my grandfather died, my mom stepped us away from the church for a while. She had some stuff she was really struggling with spiritually.
Right.
And my grandmother said, no, my babies need to be in church. So I started going with my granny. And she kept us in church. And I remember sitting on the floor listening to her and the ladies doing Bible study. When my cousins are going, you're so boring, come outside.
Yeah.
It's like, but I really want to hear what they're talking about.
Right.
They're telling me a new story about Jesus. Have you heard this story? They're like, you're such a lame-o. Out they go.
You have the hunger for it. You have the thirst for it. And you kept on going. But when did you have a recollection or revelation that I think I'm gay or I'm a lesbian?
When I finally slapped a label on it, I was a teenager. Because it was like, okay, I know the way that I'm feeling is not normal.
Right.
According to what they're telling me at church, according to what everything I see in society. And of course, I was seeing the way that my family was treating my uncle who is gay. So I'm like, I know how I feel, but I don't think I want to be that. I'm watching how those people get treated. And listen to what I just said, those people.
Yeah.
And that's often how we get identified. We are part of those people.
Yeah. We're in the outs for the most part. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And you felt that way. How did you resolve that feeling?
It took a while. It really took a while. So, of course, knowing what I was hearing, being told, feeling, I thought the right thing to do was to get married. So I married a man. That lasted a whole 2 years because that wasn't who I was.
Right.
Wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I got married a month before I turned 21.
Okay.
And divorced a month before I turned 23.
You tried and you said, no, this isn't it.
No. And at that time I told my mom, and my mom said, well, babe, I could have told you that. I said, you could have saved us all a lot of heartache if you had told me that you knew. And
so she felt it and she knew. She didn't want to approach it. Maybe she's scared of it too, maybe?
I don't know, scared of it so much as she was granting me the agency to live my life and to make my own decisions and to do what I thought was the best thing for me.
How did that conversation transpire? You said you're going to divorce.
Yeah, I said, Mom, I can't keep this lie up anymore. This is not who I am. I never should have married in the first place.
Yeah.
While in my mind, yes, the commitments and the vows that I took, I was honest. But it wasn't true to who I am.
Your authentic self, right?
Yeah. And Mom said, I understand. She said, and I love you. My mom has always been my champion, always.
Yeah.
From the jump.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been through some tough stuff together.
Yeah.
And she's always been in my corner, and me in hers. So, yeah.
That's an amazing feeling to have that kind of support. Did that help you come out in a way that, okay, I need to accept myself? If my mom accepts me, then I need to accept myself, and then maybe that set you on a path of maybe I can proceed with my ministry.
The strangest thing is, until I went into my 30s, I didn't truly start saying, yes, this is who I am. Even though I knew, it's like, this is what I used, right? It's no one's business.
True.
It's like, if they ask me, I'm not going to lie. But I'm not walking around with the tag on me saying, hey,
I'm this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, society labels us enough. And to me, a label is nothing than a way to exclude.
Yeah.
It's another way to create a barrier between two people. And I didn't want that for me and for anyone that I care about that's close to me. I'm Johnene, child of God, period.
Child of God, that's my identity.
Yeah.
So when did you decide that you're going to take up the ministry, even though, you've labeled yourself as a lesbian?
So I was in police, fire, EMS work for 22 years. In April of 2015, I walked into a church, a Lutheran church in Victoria. And the first person to put their hand out to me was the pastor of that church and say, welcome, we're glad that you're here. And I felt welcome, truly welcome. Not that I was being scrutinized or judged, truly welcome. I belonged there.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did. So this was April. In May, they went to, the pastors and some lay leaders went to an event. And the pastor came back with a pamphlet. It was for something called parish ministry training. It's for lay leaders to become more of a leader in the congregation. And on the way to the pulpit one Sunday, she dropped it in my lap. By Monday, the very next day, I emailed the person on the list. By Wednesday, I had an interview, and I was entranced into that program. And I did 1.5 years of parish ministry training. And then I had a visit from someone at the church one day and said, have you ever thought about candidacy? And I said, well, I didn't think I could do candidacy until I finished this program. Apply. So I did. And all the time I'm praying, God, I'm broke as a joke. If this is truly what you want for me, make it happen, and make it happen easy.
Yeah.
Doors that I didn't even know were available just started flying open. And so December 2018, I was entranced into what they call candidacy. And I started seminary.
How long did that take?
3 years.
3 years. Yeah.
But I was in a program to where the 3 years that I was doing my seminary training, I was also the pastor for two congregations here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
At the same time.
How did people feel about having a lesbian pastor?
Some people left the church before I ever got here, so I really don't know. Other people were kind of, I don't know. For them, it was actually more that I was a female, not that I was a gay female, because they had never had a gay pastor or a female pastor in these two congregations before. So that was the biggest shocker. Oh my gosh, it's a female. And then you add
the other element. Yeah.
Right. Let's add this other layer.
Yeah.
Let's ice that cupcake.
Right.
Yeah. So once we got past that, and for me, it was just being my authentic self the entire time. It's like, I'm not hiding who I am. I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm going to say what I believe Jesus has for me to say, like it or not. And some people who had left the church came back. They were watching online after COVID or during COVID, and they thought, this person could be my pastor. So they came back.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing what happens when folks are presented with a face, an embodiment of someone that they like, or even someone that they love, that causes them to challenge their bias.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, do I really not like gay people? Where I love this person.
Yeah.
And it causes them to challenge that bias. And the rest is up to God.
Yeah.
I just do what I'm asked to do. God has changed the hearts and the minds.
So you mentioned earlier that it took you some time to resolve being a lesbian and being a Christian at the same time. How were you able to resolve that? Like what took you, like what steps did you take in order for you to be at peace about being who you are and also loving Christ at the same time?
I would like to say it was this grandiose, just so beautiful process. But it is as simple as continuing to pray. Because even though I wasn't part of the institution,
right,
I never stopped loving God. That relationship never changed.
Yes.
I didn't have a community that I could celebrate that with.
Right.
But I didn't step away.
You did it on your own. Yeah.
And ironically, the thing that finally got me was, remember, you're created in my image. I knew who you were going to be before you were ever born. I know the number of hairs on your head.
Yeah.
You are mine. Hearing that statement during prayer is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for us all to remember that. We were created in the image of God. God already knew who we were going to be.
Yeah.
God knew we were going to be messed up. That's the reason we have Jesus.
That's right.
God knew that we were going to continue to screw up. Again, that's why we had Jesus.
Yeah.
But God loves us and wants nothing but to have a relationship with us. I think it's hilarious when I hear people from some denominations say, have you found God? Was he missing? Were they missing?
Yeah.
It's like, I was the one that was lost, not God.
Right.
God found me.
Yeah. And in fact, he keeps reaching out, and reaching out, and always there.
Yeah.
It's only when we're ready, usually, is what happens.
Unfortunately, it usually takes a trauma before we realize we can't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And we reach for that higher power, regardless of the name of that power for you. Notice, I, out of habit, identified God in a patriarchal way. But I truly believe that God is non-binary. There is no gender to God. Especially if you believe in the Trinitarian aspect, then you have God who is identified as Father, you have God as Son in Jesus Christ, and you have the Holy Spirit,
right,
which is a feminine in literature. So you truly have all of those aspects to God.
It's true.
So to just limit it to a patriarchal moniker is very limiting.
It is. As a believer myself, I also follow different, pastors out there. And there had been some sermons that say that, God is a spirit being. And if you're a spirit, you don't have a gender. We have a human form, but ultimately we are a spirit being. And it just so happened that we have to assign a body for us to do these physical things in the physical realm. So that makes sense to me. So during the time that you were resolving being lesbian and, being a Christ follower, there was no church available at the time. Is that right?
Right. I was not willing to attend a congregation where I felt as though I were going to continue to be abused
Mm-hmm.
by their version of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the Bible is the greatest love story ever written. And it's weaponized and perverted, and the gospel is used to punish and used to meet different people's agendas of hate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to subject myself to that anymore.
Right.
Because the idea and the relationship that I had with God was not one
Mm-hmm.
that I kept hearing presented.
Yeah. So, would you say that your knowledge of the Bible by studying on your own and developing that relationship with Christ, so that helped you sort of solidify that I don't even need to go physically to church for me to have a relationship with Christ or grow my faith?
Right. Honestly, I understand folks who feel like they don't want any part of the institution
Mm-hmm.
or question the institution
Right.
because of the abuse that has happened there, be it in any form
Mm-hmm.
of abuse. The things that I was hearing as a young person was abuse.
Right.
But it doesn't get labeled that way,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Questioning the institution, I understand. The institution, though, is necessary for community. We were created for community.
Yeah.
That's why so many of us struggled during the shutdown, the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, was we missed the contact, the connection, the community.
Right.
That's what a lot of that Sunday morning event is for,
Yeah.
is the community.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that it's for is I believe we have a baptismal vocation.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was of service. It started in EMS,
Mm-hmm.
and now it is service in God's church. For other people, it may be to be a doctor or a lawyer or a computer programmer. That's their baptismal vocation.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they are in the world, where they manifest the light and love of Jesus Christ in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They do that 6 days a week. When they come into the church on Sunday mornings, it's like a filling station.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity to be fed by the Word of God, get refreshed by the community of their like-minded believers,
Right.
so that they can go out and do it again for another 6 days.
Yeah.
That's my concept of the community and the Sunday morning event.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important.
Yeah. Is that what led you back going to a Lutheran church? You missing that component?
I never ever fathomed being Lutheran. I started off in the Church of Christ,
Uh-huh.
my family,
Yeah.
then ended up in a Pentecostal church.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I received the call at youth camp at 16.
Uh-huh.
Then, as a young adult, found MCC, Metropolitan Community Church,
Yes.
which is open to us.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, their liturgy is similar, some components of the Lutheran Church.
Uh-huh.
But all I ever knew was the Lutheran Church is so very Catholic-like.
They are.
And
yes.
I was like, I don't want all that.
Some places aren't, though.
Some places are not.
Yeah.
But the strangest thing was, because I'm so regimented,
Uh-huh.
and that was comforting to know that these pieces of liturgy are there and they can speak to me differently every week.
Mm-hmm.
So long as I'm truly open to them and it's not just da 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 da, and where it's rote, you know, but to truly listen to what you're saying or singing, you have the ability to experience it new every week,
Right.
which is beautiful to me.
Yes. Yes. So you were living in Victoria at the time and happened to hear about this Lutheran church?
A friend of mine at the hospital, I was working EMS there, a friend of mine at the hospital said, I know you're searching. And she said, come to my church. They will love you. And they did. And they still do.
And that led you back to your call. Do you feel like it's 360 or what is it? Like, do you feel like it's, yeah, like at that time you're like, okay, I'm coming back home? It felt like that?
It did in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, for a long time, I punished myself. I felt as though I had run from the call of God.
Mm-hmm.
I even said I pulled a Jonah. But a couple of years ago, God finally released me from my self-imposed guilt
Mm-hmm.
and said the church had to change so they could accept the leader I had called.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that I had to change to meet the church. The church had to change
Mm-hmm.
so that I could lead in the way that God had called me to.
Yeah.
In my true self, in authenticity to myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you know when the Lutheran Church changed? Because I don't believe that they've always been accepting of the gay community.
So not all Lutheran churches are.
Okay.
There are different types of Lutheran churches.
Uh-huh.
I happen to be a part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the ELCA.
Okay.
And before 2009, they were ordaining gay pastors as long as you didn't say anything. We had a don't ask, don't tell thing kind of going on.
I see.
But in 2009, they said, no, we will ordain gay pastors so that they can openly be authentic.
Who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And not have to hide parts of themselves in order to serve the church and the people.
Right.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, that was in 2009.
Yeah.
The ELCA did that.
So right now you're the lead pastor at Hope Lutheran in Leon Valley.
Off Callahan.
Off Callahan.
Yeah,
That's
the
right.
Leon Valley congregation closed in February of last year.
Oh, I see. And how long you've been there since last year?
I'm in my 5th year.
5th year. Wow. What's the best part of being a pastor that you like the best?
I always called it the GE moment when I was teaching. When you're looking at someone's face,
Mm-hmm.
and when they finally get it,
Mm-hmm.
the light bulb comes on.
Yeah.
The GE moment. When they hear something that I say or experience God in a new way based on how the Holy Spirit presents it from me, and it's the look on their face. There's just that pure, unperverted look of love and acceptance, or whatever it is that they have needed and looked for.
Mm-hmm.
Once that finally comes to them, that's the best part of ministry.
Yeah. The revelation, right? The look in their face. That's true. Do you have a lot of gay people that go to your church?
So right now, aside from myself, we have one teenager who is non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
And to my knowledge, I have one adult, but they haven't said that to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I believe just from some of the conversations that we've had,
Yeah.
that they may be.
Yeah. And do you still think that today that it still matters to your parishioners? I don't know if you call them parishioners, what you call them, but do you think that they still think of you first as a lesbian as opposed to being a pastor, or no, it doesn't matter now?
No, I think we've moved so far beyond that.
Yeah.
God has moved them
Uh-huh.
beyond that.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time telling them how labels are exclusionary.
Mm-hmm.
We should only interact with everyone as a child of God. Because as soon as we slap any type of label on them, it just creates distance between us.
Mm-hmm.
But not only does it create distance between the two people that you're doing that to, it creates distance between you and God.
Why do you think we assign labels?
First, believe it was for the reason of exclusion. It's like, okay, we're going to slap this label on them. Back when folks had leprosy, it's like, oh, the leper, stay away.
Right.
We saw it with segregation here in our own country between the whites and the blacks.
Right.
The label of color, the label of sexuality was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks be to God for the folks who were brave enough to do Stonewall, to start breaking down some of those labels and saying, yes, we may be, but honestly, this was only part of who I am
Yeah.
as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Just see me as a person. It's kind of a challenge that I have today with all of the different labels that there are within the gay community. I mean, gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, asexual, two-spirit, intersex. There are a lot within that. And I know these are people looking just so that they can say, okay, there I am. There
Right.
I am. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's that search for identity.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing is people use that label against them. They use it as a way of exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It may help them to feel included,
Right.
but it gets used against them. It gets weaponized,
Yeah.
just like the Bible.
Yeah.
So I have a real hard time with labels.
Mm-hmm. And I can see that why. Because it is true. It could get, in a way, it can be productive because once you assign a label to some things, it's more organized. But then that organization can also lead to, like what you're saying,
Yeah.
either exposure, and then it could also box you to a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think more and more we're finding that sexuality could also be fluid. So that totally makes sense. What would you say to our listeners who are searching for God and is afraid to go to a church?
First, know that you are loved, you are welcome, and you belong. There's a website called Reconciling Works. You can log on to the Reconciling Works website and look for congregations that will work for social justice for you, will welcome you, and will walk with you and honor you in your true identity and your authentic self. Look for a congregation. Start there. Once you find them, watch them online. Most all church services are streamed now.
Mm-hmm.
Find them. See if they're living what they're claiming.
Right.
Investigate. You don't ever have to walk into a building. You can do so much of finding out who people are online.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you feel comfortable, step out.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for people to think that there's anything to this when I say it, but there's absolutely nothing that we will encounter on this earth that Jesus hasn't already. Jesus was harassed. Jesus was chastised, made fun of, beaten, stripped naked, and killed. Because God loved us so much that God wanted an eternal relationship with us.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus endured that because of love.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely nothing that any human person can say to us that can undo that. We are the only persons who can say whether or not we want a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
God's already standing there with hands held out, arms stretched wide, wanting to welcome us home.
Mm.
Just waiting for us to take the steps. Fear comes from the devil. So the more that the devil can keep us afraid, even of the people of God, the more they continue to keep a foothold on us. So remember, you weren't made with a spirit of fear.
That's right. Thank you so much for those words. I think we have a lot of people out there who struggles or struggled. I know for my own self, because I grew up Catholic, I had to find, and we'd had this conversation before, I had to keep seeking for ways to still have my spiritual life nourished. And for the longest time myself, I had to do my own Bible studies, my own prayer time, just to find something to supplement that. And it's, the Sunday mornings at church, that's super helpful because community, being out there, worshiping together at the same time, there is a lot of power to that. So it's wonderful that you came to the show today so that we could talk about it. It's an important topic to have and to discuss. It could be a bit controversial, so to speak, because, like you said, it's been used and abused and have been weaponized. So, so as to confuse people, because that way they will never want to go to church. They will never want to be part of it because why? They've been chastised and all of that. So, having you at the show definitely has, I hope, will at least get people to start thinking about it again, that there are, that there are churches that are open to it if they would want to, and there's support out there and resources out there to start their journey, because it starts with just a one step step out of fear and be brave enough and bold enough to pursue that. So you're with someone right now.
Yes.
How did you find your partner?
When I was working EMS, she's a nurse at one of the hospitals.
Oh,
so yeah.
You developed a friendship first that eventually turned into a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, those are the best kinds. Rooted with friendship and then blossomed into another. Have you ever had trouble with dating before? Do you have any dating tips? From a partner,
tips.
from a
Dating
pastor
tips.
lens.
Yes. From a pastor lens, always remember that God is first,
Mm-hmm.
and then their partner, and you want that for your partner too. You want your partner to have a strong relationship with the deity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep it open
Right.
for those who aren't Christian.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to have a strong relationship, just like you have a strong relationship. Because believe it or not, that the strength of that relationship will help you
Mm-hmm.
in the strength of your own. Because then you know how to have a tough relationship. It's the most extreme long distance relationship ever to have a relationship with God, I'm telling you, right? You never get to see them, they never visit.
I've never thought of it in that way, but that is 100% true.
It's not that they don't visit, just not in the way that we're used to.
That physically we can see
way.
them.
Yeah.
Right.
But have that foundation first, and never lie to yourself or try to be who they want you to be.
Mm-hmm.
And don't do that to them either. Allow each other to be your authentic, true selves in all your brokenness and all your quirkiness and silliness.
Right.
If they accept and love you for that, and you can do the same for them,
that's the person.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, final question. Because I always ask all the guests here, if you're a taco, what kind of taco would you be?
Chorizo, huevo con papa.
Oh.
Chorizo, egg, and potato.
That's hearty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you've got the chorizo that's a little bit spicy, yet subtly. It can either be right there in your face or it can be subtle, and it's like, oh my gosh, that was very spicy on the back end. The egg holds it all together, the binder, and the papa for the comfort, because potatoes are comfort food.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Well, Pastor Johnene, thank you so much for stopping at the Taco Stand podcast. It was so great to have you. Final words for our listeners out there.
I hope that you can love yourselves as much as Jesus loves you.
Thank you. There you have it, everybody. That is Pastor Johnene Cunningham. Thank you again for staying open and for listening to our story. And if you're interested in the Just Us Lesbians group, you will find us in Meetup, Instagram, and Facebook. Hope to see you in our next event.